Welcome aboard the National Geographic Resolution. We're off on our grand adventure to South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. You can ask any naturalist what is their favorite trip that we do. Most of them are going to say South Georgia. Why? Because it's filled with wildlife. This is the rawest, most pristine place you're ever going to visit on the planet. South Georgia is home to actually millions of seabirds, hundreds of thousands of fur seals, and even more king penguins. So once again, welcome aboard the National Geographic Resolution, Lindblad Expedition's newest ship in the fleet. Well, welcome to Salisbury Plain on South Georgia. What an unbelievably spectacular morning for us for our very first landing here in South Georgia. The sun is out, the breeze is offshore, and as you can see behind me, there are hundreds of thousands of penguins to welcome us. The team is all ready and set up to do stern landings here at Salisbury, which will show the guests what we're really made of.
Mind blown. It's incredible. This place is amazing. It's first time here and it's beyond my wildest expectations.
It's my first day on South Georgia Island. It's amazing, it's incredible. The cheese has come off my cracker.
Oh my God, the penguins, the colors on the head, the yellow, I can't imagine, I just can't believe how majestic and beautiful they are.
I'm thrilled that we also are wearing the orange.
We're accessorizing to the penguins.
We're in a colony of king penguins, one of the largest king penguin colonies in the world. About 140,000 pairs of penguins, it's hard to tell. We're very lucky at the moment, we're at the interface between two cycles. So like I say, we have all the old chicks from last year, the new chicks from this year. It's fantastic. We have a lot of molting adults that have finished breeding and are just getting their feathers ready for a whole new season. They're off in a huge big group over here. They have what's called a catastrophic mode. So they drop all their feathers. Now they don't go bald, you know, they're not skin, but they very quickly shed all their feathers and regrow the new ones in a very short period of time. So if you look, we've got the feet low down, set right back on the body. So that gives them a very upright stance. It's the only way they can stand on land. But when you see them in the water, those feet are right at the back, giving propulsion and using them to steer. They can use it like a little rudder along with the tail. Make very tight, very sharp turns. The beak, obviously long, these luminous colors right down the beak, you know, may help to guide a bird's beak towards fish. The eye, amazing eyes, amazing eyes. They're a kind of reddish brown color. Now the pupil in the eye can expand and contract about 300 times. They've got very dense feathers, very tightly packed, lots of different types of feathers, from fluffy, downy feathers to more waterproof, longer, stiffer feathers, tightly, densely packed together. I've been speaking to the guests here today. Nobody can fail to be inspired by a place like this. We have to go, unfortunately. We have many more places to see.
As we were sailing through South Georgia waters on our way to our afternoon operations, we were lucky enough to encounter some of the largest animals on this planet. Blue whales and fin whales were in the water all around us, and they're so amazing. It's incredible to be able to have an experience with the largest animal that has ever lived on the planet. Records of blue whales have been found to be lengths of 110 feet.
Well, we're here in Hercules Bay, a beautiful protected bay. You probably noticed these incredible rock formations surrounding us, these folds of rock, metamorphic rock. You see these beautiful folds. It's almost organic in nature, almost alive. And it's the best place for us to see macaroni penguins. The really interesting thing about the crested penguins, I think, is they lay 2 eggs like many other penguins, but the first one is smaller than the second, and it almost never survives. It might hatch, but it almost never survives. They represent to me the teenage years when I had a perm. That's that awkward period. You can see how they move. It is very much a hop.
Well, guys, we have with Frangelico, Baileys, Amaretto, Peppermint, a little bit of Kahlua or Scotch to put in this beautiful hot chocolate, a little bit spicy. Aquí va. Yeah. There you are.
Yeah, right?
There you are.
That's a beautiful next level.
Cheers!
Myself and Emmett are your undersea team, and we have had the privilege of being able to dive in the Southern Ocean in both South Georgia and the Falklands. One of the most important things that I love about the ocean here is how incredibly biodiverse and colorful it is, and it's always such a surprise to not only us, but also to share with you. In abundance here are kelp forests. They are almost like terrestrial forests in that there are animals that live at every level of them. In the canopy, among the stipes, and down among the holdfasts, many different animals make their home and find food and shelter. Buried in a lot of the sediment, we found many small anemones. Anemones are cnidarians, so they are an animal that has stinging cells surrounding a central mouth, and they use those cells to catch prey, stun them, and feed. Not many schooling fish are found in the Southern Ocean because it's such a cold environment. It's a lot more advantageous to be something that sits and waits for its food to come to you. So we saw a couple of small tide pool sculpin, and these are ambush predators. They're color mimicking to the environment around them so that they can be well camouflaged to ambush their prey. Thousands of marine isopods can be found in the Southern Ocean. This particular species that we found on this dive are about the size of a dollar coin, and we saw several of them in mating pairs. They are bug-like, however they are not insects, and they're really amazing because they are such prehistoric animals, having lived for thousands of years in the ocean. Diving in polar waters is very cold, and of course after a while you can no longer feel your face, but the amount of life and the bizarreness of these animals that are rarely seen is so worth it and really amazing.
Ocean Harbor is probably our best place to go kayaking on this trip, and as luck would have it, we have a beautiful sunny day to check everything out. It's just great. There's no swell in here, just light wind and beautiful blue skies. It couldn't be better. One of the funnest things to do from a sea kayak is to watch the fur seals from really close proximity. We're able to get right up next to them. They're quite tolerant. And today we actually managed to see one, what we call a blondie. It's technically a leucistic type of animal where it's quite yellow in color. It's only about 1 in 1,000 animals, at least with fur seals, has that type of coloration. But we did see one, young one, and it was quite tolerant. Let us go right by it and take a look at it, get some good pictures. So that was a lot of fun. One of the things of interest to explore here from our kayaks is the shipwreck. It's the Bayard. It's a ship from the whaling days, and it's rusting away, but it's still very picturesque, very photogenic. There are, along the rails of the starboard side of it, these round disc-shaped things. They're called deadman eyes, and those were used for moving lines in and out of the ship during the whaling operations. That ship is degrading over time, but the plants have moved in, the vegetation is accumulating, and there is large tussock grass right on top of the ship, which some of the local bird life have taken advantage of by moving in and nesting there.
I'd have to say that the toughest part of a polar diver's job is sitting in a puddle of Antarctic fur seal puppies. They're so cute and so charismatic and very, very curious. They'll come right up to the camera and they interact in a completely different way than you would see them on land. They're much more approachable and friendly, and what was really amazing about getting to film them underwater was seeing how they use their pectoral flippers in a completely different way. Oftentimes in this shallow pool of 1.5 feet to 2 feet, underwater you could see that they were actually just walking on their 4 flippers with their butt floating up at the surface. Sometimes they were rolling and spinning and coming right up to us to investigate what we were. Antarctic fur seal puppies are my spirit animal. They are the best part of South Georgia.
St. Andrews Bay is one of the highlights of South Georgia. We were wondering before, do we have 200,000 pairs, 250,000 pairs, 500,000 more penguins? I don't know, there's lots of penguins. I can tell you both sexes of penguins are here, and chicks. This is the largest beach in South Georgia, and the landscape is magnificent. We have this pebbly beach with sand, full of penguins everywhere, and fur seals, some elephant seals as well, surrounded by 3 glaciers and grassy hills. There's nothing better than this. It's just a feast to the eyes and the senses.
It's fabulous. It's unimaginable that there are this many penguins all around. Everywhere you look, there's a penguin.
The sound here is just a cacophony of honks and chirps and whistles. From the adults to the chicks that whistle and chirp. It's incredible and very noisy. I think about how fortunate I am to be experiencing this in such a remote place of the world.
This is an example of maybe how this planet was before humans, a time before us. And look what we can achieve if we just protect it, if we just take care of it. So the Southern Ocean is something out of this world, and we got to experience a little bit of that.
So this is called a tidewater glacier, meaning that the foot of the glacier is underneath the lowest low tide. And when that's the case, then it'll calve both from above and below, but breaking off and forming this abrupt cliff. You know, think about it, a glacier is a balance. It's not just the area or the edge of it where it's a mass balance between the accumulation, which happens higher up, and that ice accumulates and pushed down, flows by gravity down to the base level. And at some point, you actually get into an area called the ablation zone where you're losing more ice than you're gaining from the snow. Beautiful leopard seals here. Checking out the big bits of ice before. They would be eating like the fledged chicks and stuff, the young, you know, the naive birds are much more susceptible. But interestingly enough, they probably eat as much krill as anything else. Just like the krill are so abundant, and they are able to grab mouthfuls of that.
Welcome to Grytviken. We're here on the 100th anniversary of the burial of Sir Ernest Shackleton, who is buried right here in the graveyard I'm standing in. Behind me is the old Grytviken whaling station, started by the Norwegians well over 100 years ago. This place was processing whales until the early 1960s, and much of the remains of it are here today. And today, of course, we plan to come up here and pay our respects to the boss and give him a toast.
Would you like some Irish whiskey?
Yeah.
Here you go.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
We're here to honor a great leader of men and a rather poor organizer of expeditions. When Shackleton went down to go do his major crossing of Antarctica, the guys here, the whalers, all told him, don't go, it's way too much ice. He was very poorly funded, but he had a great team, and they were very loyal to him. There's a little inscription on the back that I'm going to read to you. I hold that a man should strive to the utmost for his life's set prize. To the boss! To the boss! And then one for the boss. Boss.
This whaling station is really fascinating for photography. You have all kinds of opportunities. You can show the juxtaposition of wildlife with these incredible leftovers from the whaling days. It tells this incredible story about how nature is sort of coming back and domineering over man's attempt to, take all of this natural resource extraction down here. For me, good composition incorporates a lot of different elements. One of the things that we see here in Grytviken are leading lines. You have the curves of the whaling boats. You have these chains that are lying on the ground. They're rich in texture, they're rich in history, and they make for wonderful photographs.
The museum at Grytviken was set up in 1992 and is housed inside the former manager's villa of the whaling station that operated 1904 to 1965. The museum has a wonderful collection, not only of whaling memorabilia, but it also has an incredible room dedicated to Shackleton's story and his involvement in South Georgia. There's also a separate room that has a replica of the James Caird, the lifeboat that Worsley, Shackleton, and Crean took 800 miles across to South Georgia from Elephant Island. And so it's a great way to have the full story in one place. Another great thing to visit at Grytviken is the old Whalers Church, which operated as a Lutheran church during the whaling era. But the whalers weren't great churchgoers, and pretty soon they discovered that it was much better as potato storage than as a place of worship. Nowadays, it's a wonderful place to go, check out the library, and ring the bell.
We're in the Southern Ocean, and the ship is abuzz today with news of the discovery of the Endurance shipwreck. A South African polar vessel called the S.A. Agulhas has a multidisciplinary team that's been searching for the Endurance down in the Weddell Sea. And the Weddell Sea is only about 800 miles southwest of us, where we are in the Southern Ocean. Shackleton was the leader of the expedition on the Endurance. He was a British explorer born in Ireland and decided that he wanted to try and get all the way across the Antarctic by foot. So the first thing he did was sail down to South Georgia and down into the Weddell Sea so that he could land to make that trek across the Antarctic. But he never made it. He ended up stuck in the ice in the Weddell Sea, and it floated through the winter of 1915. And by November 1915, the Endurance sank. So the multidisciplinary team with these underwater submersibles that were used using high technology of video and photo and laser discovered the Endurance 3,008 meters, so that's almost 10,000 feet under the surface of the water. It's in a really, really icy section that's mostly covered in ice all the year round, and it took them a couple of years to find because they started last year, but in fact that same ice I'm talking about stopped them from being able to discover it. One of the most amazing things about the discovery is that the location is only 4 miles south from where Captain Frank Worsley had pinpointed where the Endurance sank 106 years ago. So the Endurance sank in November of 1915, and the men had to get off the boat and camp on the ice. They managed to stay on the ice for another 4 months, but then with spring coming, the ice started to break up. So they took to the lifeboats and had to sail then to Elephant Island. And Shackleton realized as soon as he landed that he wasn't going to be able to stay there. So again, he took one of the lifeboats that they'd covered in wood to protect it more for the treacherous crossing to South Georgia. It was 800 miles across the Drake Passage and Southern Ocean. And 16 days later, they managed to make land in South Georgia. But they were on the southern side of South Georgia, and then they had to cross over the mountains, which had never been done before. There were no maps, no nothing. But they made it to Stromness, which is a whaling station on the north. So once Shackleton had made it to Stromness, he wanted immediately to get back to Elephant Island and save his men. But he had to take multiple attempts where he was turned back by the ice. And so it wasn't till August of 1916, some 4 months after he'd left the men and they'd overwintered on Elephant Island, when he, on the Yelch show, managed to save the men on Elephant Island. Shackleton was an incredible person with amazing leadership skills, and we really talk about the grit and determination of what he and his men achieved because they all survived. All 28 men survived the ordeal. We hike the last section that Shackleton took over the mountains to get to Stromness. We obviously have the modern gear, and we're doing it in summertime, but we go from Fortuna Bay over the mountains and to that point where he would have seen with the Crean and with Worsley looking down to Stromness and where the whaling station. He thought he'd made it. He could see Stromness down in the valley, but as they looked down, they saw the immensity of this waterfall, and it was winter. So there was snow and ice. They really couldn't get around it. They made the tough decision. They needed to go down through the waterfall. Their short section of rope, they roped each one up and lowered them down. And the last one, hoping that rope would hold at the top of the waterfall around a rock, managed to get down and then did the mile down to the whaling station and managed to go and save their men in Elephant Island. So as they approached the whaling station, the first people to see them were these two little kids. And they saw them and ran away screaming because obviously they looked so horrific after all those many months out in the wilderness. So today we're visiting the whaling station that looks very different. All the buildings are in ruin, there are lots of rust, but it's a beautiful sunny day, superb for getting amazing photographs of this historical location.
This afternoon we landed in Jason Harbor, a protected, beautiful cove that was used all the way back into the whaling era. We did some great walks here, including a more strenuous walk that went up higher into the mountains, but the moderate walks, we stayed fairly low and enjoyed the boggy peatland that is really a hallmark of this area. We made our way through pools and deep sections with muck and mire. Along the way, we admired the plant life, which is full of so many different varieties, including many hundreds of types of lichen, which is and was a prime food source for the reindeer who used to inhabit these lands. We still see the remnants of their tracks as we make our way around the landscape, but they have been eradicated.
We got to dive in Stromness, and of course we again found this beautiful kelp forest, but what was most interesting was that the kelp was growing on these several steps of rocks, meaning that you could get below the kelp and find incredible, gorgeous, protected tunicates and sea sponges and all of these invertebrates lining the channels of the walls. Sponges are incredible because they can live for hundreds to thousands of years. They are quite primitive, but also the basis for a lot of what we find in the ocean. One of the most exciting things I find diving in South Georgia are sea spiders. They are not actual spiders, and they are more related to amphipods or other small crustaceans. They are such a bizarre animal, almost all leg, with a huge head that has a large proboscis, and that proboscis allows them to suck up prey from hydroids and sponges. Because they're mostly leg and have such a narrow and small body, instead of holding all of their organs centrally, they actually have parts or some of their organs within their legs. As opposed to many animals where the females are taking care of the young, males will actually carry the eggs and raise the offspring until they are hatched into small sea spiders. We had the fortune of finding a couple of sea spiders on this dive, and they're always super amazing to sit and watch. In addition to finding sponges on their own, sometimes you find bizarre things like tube worms actually living in sponges. So tube worms are a worm that will create a calcareous shell or a tube out of sand that they find and their own mucus. And sometimes they'll create those tubes in small colonies, but what we found were these colonies that had created them within the pores of sponges. They'll stick their feathery gills out and wait for that phytoplankton and zooplankton to come by, and they'll consume that just like the sponge will through its pores. These polar waters are so nutrient rich and filled with so much diverse plankton life, and we got to see some comb jellies, also called ctenophores. They're these 8 combed cilia animals that float around in the water, and they're mostly at the whims of the currents, but they do have these really fine cilia along their body that beat in this rhythmic way, and as light hits them, it creates this beautiful rainbow refraction of light. Diving in polar waters is always a treat, but can be quite tiring sometimes, so it's important to get in a snooze when you can. This morning we had really an incredible opportunity, which is to do a pre-dawn landing. So we woke everyone up at 10 to 5 this morning, loaded into Zodiacs and came ashore at Gold Harbor. Pre-dawn landings are amazing for photographers because you get an incredible opportunity for light to hit the colony and the mountains and the elephant seals, and an opportunity that isn't often found.
It's incredible to be here. The difficulty for video is that there are so many animals. Trying to show the proliferation of life and get it so that it's artistic and so that you get behavior. There's just so much going on. It's almost impossible to capture it, but it's fun.
Southern elephant seals are the largest seal in the world, and so what we have here is a large group of mixed ages of males, and they have come ashore to molt. Normally, elephant seals are spending their time out at sea this time of year. They have left the breeding colony and are going to be diving and hunting for different things like squid and fish. The reason that we're seeing all of these elephant seals on shore right now is because they're ashore molting. So this time of year, which is fall in the austral seasons, they come ashore and they create a wallow. To quote an article, a wallow is defined as a pile of belching, farting, scratching, bickering, and moaning seals, generally loafing about until they have molted.
We're here in Drygalski Fjord, the very southern end of the island. Quite a bit different than the scenery that we've been seeing for most of our trip. It's a true fjord, that is a deep valley that was over-deepened by glacial action during the last glacial maximum. Barren rock cliffs. Some places the mountains go up 1,000 meters. Very spectacular. This place, called Drygalski Fjord, is named after Erich von Drygalski, a leader of German scientific expedition in the early 1900s. He came in here And he wasn't the first. Turns out that this may be the spot where the first European who ever sighted South Georgia ended up. Anthony de la Roche was an English merchantman who got blown off course when he was returning to England from the west coast of South America. His ship all beat up. He had to seek a safe harbor, and he was able to dodge the winds, come in here, repair his ship. I think it took several weeks, and then he did eventually return home to England. So we're cruising up to the end of the fjord. We'll probably see this glacier face in front of us. It's truly a spectacular way to end our trip here to South Georgia. Spectacular scenery before we come around, head west towards the Falklands, and begin the next phase of our expedition.
We're in the Falkland Islands, finally made it after a couple of days at sea from South Georgia. Brilliant to be in a totally different ecological setup, a different group of islands. We've got lots more land birds, but the main attraction today is rockhopper penguins. These guys are fantastic, they're still breeding, there's lots of young birds about, they're molting. Quite different from the other penguins we're seeing, quite closely related to the macaroni penguins. But these guys have very strong feet, very thick feet, sharp claws, and they use the 2 feet to flip themselves up the rocks, hop up along the rocks quite high. We're, I don't know what we are, maybe 40 meters, 100 feet above sea level here, and this colony is quite settled and quite relaxed. The rockhoppers at the moment have mostly finished breeding. There are some young birds around, but a lot of the adults now at this stage are just getting themselves ready, getting themselves back in condition to go back to sea and get fed up. So they're molting all their feathers, another kind of catastrophic molt like we saw with the penguins on South Georgia, where they're losing all their feathers in kind of over the space of a couple of weeks and growing nice new fresh feathers to keep them insulated, keep them waterproof, and allow them to get back to sea for the winter, where they can face these very harsh conditions. They want to be in tip-top shape to maximise their energy intake, maximise their survival, to be ready for breeding again next year.
Well, as we depart the Falkland Islands, we can all look back on the extraordinary voyage that we had, reflect on the good fortune we had with weather and wildlife, and now we're headed off to Ushuaia. I hope everyone enjoyed this voyage and hope to see you again on a National Geographic Lindblad ship somewhere out in the world.